How's it going, everybody? Brian Alvarez here. Figure 4 Daily, July 19, 2018. Figure4online.com/wrestlingobserver.com. Lance Storm joining us here for the second straight week as Filthy is busy preparing for, of all things, a gimmick battle royal, a weapons battle royal, which, of course, he's most famous for in his wrestling career, other than, of course, his match with the Rock and Roll Express this past Saturday at the Black Label Pro Show. Lance, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm finally getting over this big laceration in my head, so it's been a trying time.
Yeah, how is your noggin?
Well, it started getting an abscess, actually. I was developing a bit of a cone head. I shared a photo online, I believe. The cut was looking great and not looking infected, but I was developing a lump, and I looked a bit like a cone head, so I went back to the doctor, and they had to cut it open again, and he figures a bit of an abscess, so they cut it open and drained it and got it covered up, and it seems to be deconifying, if you will. The lump is going away, and the head is healing up better, so I think I'm out of the woods now, and the teeth in the head has gone away.
So what did you do in the meantime when you had this giant gash in your head and you were supposed to be running your school, but obviously having to be careful with your head?
Well, I did stay out of the ring for a couple of days, maybe 2. And thankfully, we're far enough in that, you can come up with drills and spots and tell them what to do and then watch them do it, where I didn't have to be in there. And then 2 days a week, I've got Chris Knight, a former student of mine, that comes in to help with demonstrations and so forth. So he was handy in that regard, but I didn't take that much time off. I know, and holy cow, it's been a hot summer. And, we had a day of 30, 32 degrees, which is pushing 90.
What's that for us stupid Americans?
Yeah, pushing 90 for you stupid
Oh,
Americans.
my God. Yeah.
And so I bandaged the cut on my head, and I knew it wouldn't stay very long, so I actually brought the tightest winter toque that I own and put the toque on my head, a knit cap for you Americans again. We'll berate all the stupid Americans this week. So I had a winter toque on my head that fit really tight to keep the bandage in place when I was sweating. So I wrestled 3 matches with a toque on, and I was just sweating my bag off. It was so hot, but at least kept the bandage on my head so I didn't get any more dirt in it. And now I'm not even worried about it. It's healed up enough now that I don't worry about it.
Now, is there any possibility that wearing that toque on your head is what actually ended up getting it infected?
I don't believe so. It's possible, but I did have a bandage on top of the cut when I put the toque on, so I don't think that was the issue. When it's teeth, the chance of infection is really high anyway.
Sure.
So it's not all that surprising. Although the student that did it, who felt really stupid, felt better when Chris Knight, my buddy that I mentioned, he found a video clip of Steve Austin and The Undertaker doing the exact same spot. I think it was SummerSlam 98. But Steve at least had his mouth closed. So when Steve crowded Taker too much and kicked him, Taker stood up and smashed his head into Steve's chin and knocked Steve out cold.
Really?
And you just see him crumble and fall to the mat. And I guess Steve talks about the bump on his podcast frequently. But he's only out for a quick second. Taker picks him up and immediately sends him off the ropes, and they keep going. But yeah, Steve just crumbles for a split second because he got Taker standing up right into his chin.
Dude, who would have ever thought, like, of all of the... Like, I've got some stupid injuries before. Like, I blew out my knee, kind of, taking a snake eyes of all thing. Taking a snake eyes. But, like, it's just so weird. Some of these moves that... I mean, I when I heard that it happened to you, it was like, this has to be the only time in wrestling history this has ever happened. Then you find out it happens to The Undertaker and Stone Cold Steve Austin, at which point it's pretty clear it could happen to anybody.
Yeah, you usually don't get knocked out kicking somebody that's bent over, but it can happen.
Yeah, it can happen. All right, let's get into some news right here. So, a couple of days ago, about a couple of weeks ago, was on Twitter. Dave is doing his usual 9,000 Twitter response Q&As, and then in the middle of it, he just tweets you and says, "Hey, remember when Vince called after you died or something like that. Tell this story of your death.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what Dave's tweet was, but it was something about remember the time Vince called me when he thought you died. And it was weird because this was, it was when Lance Cade died. It wasn't me. I haven't, in fact, died. Although Cyrus and Paul Lazenby are continually saying so on Killing the Town.
Yeah.
But it was 2010. I was on vacation in Ontario, and I didn't know Dave well in 2010. I probably had exchanged, 2 emails with the guy. And I'm on vacation in Ontario, and I think he actually called me. It was a text or a call, I think. But he's this amazing story. And he said, I haven't talked to Vince in years. And he says, I came home and there's a message on my answering machine, and it's Vince McMahon, very adamant that I have to call him back because Lance Storm died. And it's like, and Dave was just like, this is really odd that Vince would reach out like this. And then I think 3 messages later on his machine, Vince is like, oh, I found out it was Lance Cade, not Lance Storm. Never mind, you don't have to call me. And Dave thought it was an interesting story, and I thought it was, and I wonder what, because again, Vince and I always got along really well, but it's not like we were close.
Sure.
He would joke around with me, but it's like I didn't have his number, right? We didn't have any, sit down in private conversations. So I'm wondering what was so out of the ordinary.
Because it was
my
you.
Death. Go ahead.
Because it was you.
But still, it's like, and this, sounds horrible, but there's a lot of wrestlers pass away, and Vince doesn't think he has to call Dave to figure out what's going on. And the only thing I could think of is, I'm quite probably the cleanest cut guy in the business ever. And it's like, if I'm dropping dead at a young age, we've got an epidemic going on.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think of a good example. If all right, I'll give you kind of a weird example, but let's just say that we find out that like all of these former ECW guys, as they get older, they all have CTE and they're all having problems. And then one day I wake up and I read, who would be a good example? Jim Ross, CTE. Like, that one to me would be the one where I, as a wrestler, would be like, whoa, hold on a second. This is a guy that did nothing but commentary, and you can probably count on 2 hands the number of bumps that he's ever taken in his life. That guy got CTE? I got to talk to somebody about this. So I think with you, it's sort of like, Vince was coming from an era, this would have been, 2009, I think it was, that Lance Cade died, or whatever year it was. But, I mean, in the 80s and 90s, there were guys who were dying left and right, and a lot of them used a lot of drugs, a lot of them used a lot of steroids, and after a while, I mean, this sounds horrible, but I remember, like, in the late 90s through, I'd say, probably about 2010, like, I would literally wake up every day and check my email to see if somebody died. I don't even do that anymore. Like, it's been so long, like, we'll get people dying here and there, but it's nothing like it used to be. So it's sort of the same thing. Like, I'm sure Vince was hearing all the time about people dying, but to hear that Lance Storm died young, like, that's something you got to figure out what's going on here.
Yeah, and I'm assuming he confused our real names because they would have announced that Lance McNaught died.
Sure.
And I was probably the first Lance that came to Vince's head. And he was just like, yeah, when he heard that Lance McNaught died at 29, he wanted to ask Dave, was like, man, I can't believe Lance was that young. But yeah, and it is sad because, like you say, you got to the point where you were almost expecting it. And it got to a point where, and I almost don't want to say it because it sounds horrible, but it's almost that there was a time there where my reactions was almost a groan with a "oh, not again," rather than the "oh, I can't believe it." It's shock. It's just disappointment that there's another one, because there was a wave of really bad ones, and it's really horrible. But I remember when, again, I don't remember the year, but the year of the Benoit tragedy. Beef Wellington, who was a former tag team partner of Chris Benoit's in Stampede, who I worked with a fair bit when I was here when I broke in, he was found dead, I believe, the Thursday or the Friday that weekend. And Sherry Martel was found the next day. And in class on Monday, I actually said to my students, it's like, these things usually come in threes. I'm almost half expecting to hear another one today. And it was 2 hours later, I got the news of the Benoit tragedy. And it was just like, wow. And that obviously was super heavy. But there was a point where deaths were happening so frequent that you just sort of half expected it. And that's one thing, too, as much as people like to criticize the wellness policy. It's like, I do believe it's made a huge difference.
Oh, it absolutely, positively, without question, has made a huge difference. So we've also got... Oh, I guess we could... let's do current stuff, then we'll go into the... I got a big list of things here to talk to you about. We'll save the retro stuff for later, but... On to some current topics. Hulk Hogan returning to the company. Very, very, what would the word be? Controversial, obviously. It's funny. Well, first off, let's get your thoughts, and I'll tell you what I think is kind of interesting about it.
I'm not as in favor of it as many. I think Titus
Well, let's just stop
O'Neil-
right there. We'll just stop right there. Funny you should mention that. When this first happened, there were so many fans that I heard from that were so ready to forgive Hulk Hogan. This is 3 years ago. It had just happened. All I heard from were fans who were like, everybody makes mistakes, this, that, everybody should deserve another chance. Hulk Hogan was our childhood, blah, 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 blah. Here it is. It's been 3 years. And if anything, you would think that after 3 years, fans would sort of be like, well, it's been 3 years, blah, 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 blah. For some reason, and maybe it's because of the meeting that he called and he dropped the ball on the meeting and just said what everybody didn't want to hear. Big misstep by the Hulkster. I mean, people seem really upset about this. Like, they're more upset now than they were 3 years ago when it first happened.
Yeah, I think that is or Hogan is falling victim to Trump era crucify everybody. The Me Too movement, and again, all of these things are not comparable, but it's one mistake, you should lose your job and you're crucified now. We're not going to tolerate things as much, and racism is way more in the forefront because we've had the white nationalist rallies and the, every day you pick up the, your phone and you see the story of, man calls the cops because a black lady was at the pool and, cop stands by while man berates the woman wearing the Puerto Rican shirt. And we're getting to the point where people are more sensitive. In some cases, we probably should be, but we're also way less understanding and tolerant, and perhaps maybe we should be. I don't know. On every instance is different, but I think we're at a point now, and I think it is the Trump era, that racism is a big topic. Where again, how dare these people take a knee to protest that innocent black people are getting murdered? It's like there's a lot of everybody's jumping on one side or the other of a topic. And with Hogan now 3 years removed, racism's a big deal right now. And there seems to be people that, they're immigrants, screw them. And then there's people that, want acceptance. And I think my biggest issue with what a lot of people say, and again, I think Titus O'Neil said it best, but the people who are forgiving of Hogan, and if you want to be forgiving of Hogan, by all means, that is your right. I think the biggest thing that they say, it's like everybody deserves a second chance. And while I like that as a theory, I don't think a second chance is a get out of jail free card. I think if you make a mistake and not in an attempt to get your job back, get accepted again, but you actually show remorse, you actually try to change just because you want to be a better person and not make that mistake again, then we can be at a place where we give you a second chance. Where I feel, and perhaps unfairly so, that when they pulled his photos, I don't think it was ever a suspension from the Hall of Fame, but when they pulled his photos and separated, hey, we're not attached to Hulk Hogan anymore, I just sort of always felt they'll get him back as soon as they can. And it's when you're looking for the second chance before any change has been made, then I'm not as in favor of a second chance. If you try to make good, and you and Dave talked about it, the charity work. If you do it on your own, not looking for the second chance just because you are remorseful, then you deserve a second chance. If you're doing it because it's the penance you have to do to get the second chance, then I don't think you deserve one. And I don't know enough about the current Hogan situation and the current Hogan mood to fairly judge whether he is deserving of that second chance. All of my interactions with him in the business and personally have been all favorable, which gives me probably a little more forgiveness, where I can certainly understand, New Day and Mark Henry and Titus O'Neil. I think their way in on this should be taken more heavily than mine, because they were obviously far more offended by it than I would be. But it was a horrible thing. And again, Titus O'Neil with you need to be sorry for what you said, not sorry you were recorded. I think that's an important thing. And again, I wasn't there for the meeting, so I don't know what Hogan said, but that's my take.
All I know is from reading the people who were at the meeting what they said. I mean, if I were the New Day or Titus O'Neil or whoever, and this guy said what he said, and then he showed up for a meeting, and his excuse was, I didn't know I was being filmed. I was being filmed without my knowledge. It's like, that's what you're going to come out here and apologize for, that you said it and you didn't know you were being filmed? How about you apologize for what you said? And again, listen, yes. I wasn't there in the room, but like everybody who's talked about this, James Ellsworth talked about it, New Day's made a statement, Titus has made a statement. I mean, dude, that's what you said? My excuse is I was filmed without my knowledge when I said these terrible things. That's what you came up with? Are you kidding me? Even not being Titus O'Neil or the New Day, I'm offended.
No, yeah, that can't be the message you need to take away from is be careful, people have phones and will record you. It should be, I need to be a better person. I don't know what got into me. I said that just because I was trying to, be cool in front of the audience that I had at the time, and it was unforgivable. But that's where it needs to start. But, and to that end, too, I don't think anyone deserves a life sentence for any one thing they've ever said. So I think there is room for a second chance. But again, you have to earn the opportunity for a second chance. You don't just automatically get one. So a couple of days ago, I was talking about actually, it's been a week now. I've been talking about it almost every day because people keep bringing it up, including Dave last night. The Mustache Mountain Undisputed Era match on last week's NXT, which I loved with all my heart. Dave loved it with all of his heart. What did you think, Lance? It was funny because my opinion of it changed a couple of times while watching it. Because I'd heard so much about it that it was so great, And when
the first half is not that exciting.
Pardon?
The first half is not that exciting.
That wasn't my issue. My issue was the dueling chant. And I hate dueling chants. I didn't mind it at the beginning because both teams come out. And all right, if you love both teams, great. Do the dueling chant. At the very beginning, they were both just fighting and no one was getting the upper hand. So if you want to chant for both, great. But when they cut off Trent Seven, I believe it was, when they cut him off and they started beating him up and you still do the dueling chant, it's like you've ignored a significant change in the match now. Your dueling chant, to me, is proving you're not actually watching the match. You're just trying to say, we love these teams, we love these teams. It's like, well, how about you shut up and watch these teams then? And that annoyed me. And I almost turned the match off. And I'm really glad I didn't, because once they stopped the dueling chant, this match got really, really, really good. And there was an issue, and the only other person that I've heard mention it is Todd Martin, who used to be on the site. He picked up the same thing I did. And it was the problem with, why didn't he just make a save? His partner is screaming and yelling. He's standing 4 feet away from him for minutes on end. and he threw in the towel rather than just stepping through the ropes and making a save. And this is where there's two problems with this. A, he should have just done that. But I think you guys have mentioned it before, and I didn't know this existed when I was there. But there's the secret rule. There's the secret ultra kayfabe double probation secret rule of you're only allowed one save each. And they never tell the fans this, but apparently it's a rule because there has been over the years occasionally a DQ on a save.
Yes.
And the fans go, what the hell? There's saves all the time. Well, apparently because it was the second one. And when I was watching this match, and I was loving, once the Dueling Champs, I was loving this match. I'm like, this is awesome. And they had a submission on Trent Seven, and Tyler Bate made the save. And the referee got up in his face, and as he was pushing him out, I saw him mouth what I think was, that's your one, and he held up one finger to Bate. And Bate acknowledged that that's your one save, you don't get another. But if it wasn't a goddamn secret rule, and the announcers would have told us, wow, he used up his one save. If Trent Seven gets caught in another submission hold, he can't save him without getting disqualified. If they'd have told us this, Tyler Bate not getting in the ring and just saving his partner would make a hell of a lot more sense. And the drama of the finish would have been even better. And even with that, if you want to accept the fact that Tyler Bate is literally, Ron Howard, Opie from Mayberry, he won't break the rules. He's not allowed to make a save, so he won't. He'd rather quit and lose the titles than cheat. I might be able to accept that. But you could have put the ref closer to that corner. And you could have had him remind you're not allowed, you had your one, and you could have had Bate try to get in and have the ref prevent him. Where it's like, okay, Tyler Bate's not going to punch the ref to get past him to make the save, and he gives up. And then the match would have been absolutely awesome, phenomenal drama, some of the best built drama to a finish ever. But when you don't know the secret rule, I'm like, why is this idiot just not making a save? He did one earlier. And the finish, I thought, was really dumb because of that.
Well, I guess if you watch a lot of WWE and that's what you're used to, then it was kind of dumb. But, I mean, listen, I overanalyze everything all the time, but whatever they did, like the fans were so into the last 5 minutes of that match. Like they were living and dying by the last 5 minutes. And the reason they did that was because we had to forget all of that stuff for 5 minutes. And to me, I was able to forget all that stuff for 5 minutes. I mean, I can look back later and go, yeah, why didn't that idiot make the save? Or, he could have just run in and saved the titles on a DQ. But, I mean, at the end of the day, the story they were telling was, this guy's supposed to be a babyface. He's a good guy. He doesn't want to just save his titles on a DQ. He really cares about his friend. Maybe he's not even thinking about that stuff because his friend is in so much pain. There's a towel hanging right there. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with that criticism, but I just loved the match so much that I'm willing to forget about all of that for one match and just enjoy what they put together and how great I thought it was.
But just have Nigel mention that was his one save. In NXT, you're only allowed one. And then this match is a Grand Slam home run, one of the best I've ever seen.
But maybe they were thinking, if we don't... Okay, here's what maybe they were thinking. If we just do this match in a vacuum, and granted, I argue all the time that you can't do stuff in a vacuum, but this one was so good, I'll make an exception. If you just do the match in the vacuum, look at the reaction that they got from the people. It totally worked. Maybe they thought, you know what? If we announce that he's used his one save, and if he gets in again, it's going to be a disqualification, then you actually remind the viewers that this guy's an idiot for not just saving his titles on a DQ. How do you not talk about the titles, the champions remain champions on a DQ? How do you not talk about that if you're going to tell the people that he's used his one save, and if he gets in again, he's going to be DQ'd and save his titles? Maybe that would have taken away from the match. It's exactly,
you don't word it that way.
It's exactly like the opposite of the the Andrade Cien Almas match on SmackDown, which apparently was exactly what I thought it was. They thought this match is going to be so great, it's going to be so good that even if Andrade loses clean to the champion, he will still be elevated like some of the guys in that John Cena Open Challenge were. Now, it didn't work out that way. I'm sure that was great on paper, but in reality, in real life, in that building, it didn't work. All I know is this one, in real life, in that building, did work. So I can't complain too much.
Yeah, it did work. And I would have just worded it if I would have never mentioned that if he gets in, it's a DQ, because then fans are going to just expect a DQ. I would have just liked them to mention he can't save. He used his one. Trent's got to do this on his own, and then just build the drama and don't explain the difference. But again, it is a bit of a nitpick. I loved the match once the dueling chants stopped. I just would have liked, and I would like them to explain the secret rule more. I think you could add a lot of drama with you only get one save. You got to make it when it counts. And I think it could add to the story. But yeah, all four men worked phenomenally in that match. The drama was great.
Becky Lynch on SmackDown.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this because I had someone on, I mentioned this on Twitter, how, and I noticed it, I think about a month ago, that I noticed that, you know what, Becky's just always winning clean by submission. Like, There's no angle, there's no bullshit. She just has a match and she wins by submission. And I was liking it, going, it's like, hey, when they need a new challenger, Becky's going to be strong. And when she won this week, I'm like, great. I tweeted out that I love the fact that they're just giving Becky clean wins. And then when she challenged for the title, going, hey, you know, I've been beating everybody. I want a title shot. I'm like, this is awesome. So much better than a multi-person number one contenders match. And then they did the backstage segment with Paige and Carmella, and I was deflated. Because they did the, why does she deserve a title match? And I'm like, oh, because she's tapped like everyone in the division. And so Paige did the, well, she's going to wrestle you next week. And if she beats you, she can get a title match. And I'm like, oh, this is not the way wrestling is supposed to be. Could you imagine if they made Daniel Cormier beat Stipe before he was awarded a title shot? It's like, that's not the way it works. And I tweeted that, you know, I don't like the you have to beat the champion to even get a title shot. And a fan, and I believe they were being sincere, it's like, they asked, it's like, well, how else can you do it? And I'm like, okay, here's a person that's only been watching wrestling a short period of time. But it's like, in any sport, it's like, whoever the most dominant person outside of the champion is, they're the number one contender. I learned this as a fan watching WrestleMania 3. Because I was, again, like any dumbass smart mark wrestling fan geek, I was one too. And when I was the build to WrestleMania, before WrestleMania 3, I'm like, I'm trying to, fantasy book. Okay, who's going to win? Who's going to win? I got to pick the winners and stuff. And I thought for sure JYD's got to beat King Harley Race. It's like, JYD's the hero. That's the story. You got to put him over. And then Harley Race beat him. And I'm like, huh, that's disappointing. And then I realized that after Hogan beat Andre, his next challenger was Harley Race. And I went, oh, you got to build up the next challenger so you've got somebody ready for the champion. And I learned that in whatever year WrestleMania 3 was. And this is what I don't think gets done enough, but it's like they were doing it with Becky. It's like, okay, Carmella's doing her feud with Asuka. Let's give Becky her wins. And it's like, she's just the deserving champ. And where the, if you beat the champion, you get a title shot comes from, there's two ways you can do it. They did it with Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair. When Steamboat came back to the NWA or WCW, whatever it was, in 89, I think, he was a surprise tag team partner for a match against Flair and whoever. Let's say it's Barry Windham. I don't even know. But he was the surprise babyface in a tag match against the world champion, and he pinned the world champion in a tag team match. And everyone, oh my God, Ricky Steamboat just pinned the world champion. He deserves a title match. It's like, that makes sense. Because it was a single match. It's like, well, why isn't he just the champ? And then the other scenario that it can work is if you're doing the champ's just doing warm-up matches. You know what I mean? I'm going to, I'm the world champion. I'm going to beat Barry Horowitz this week. It's not a title match. It's Barry Horowitz. And I just go out and I beat him up in 2 minutes. And then I go out there and I beat Reno Reagans in 2 minutes the next week. And then maybe if you wanted to, I'm going to go out there and, face the 1-2-3 kid, some other unknown jobber. And the guy pulls the upset 1-2-3, and we're like, oh my God. And it's like, this kid just upset the world champion. And then you can do a title match. But when you're a former world champion yourself, you've been undefeated in 3 months, tapping out all your opponents, you don't have to beat the champion to prove you're worthy of being a contender. You're a contender.
Well, I overlooked every single thing that you said because I just figured that Paige was an idiot GM. As we learned from the shark cage stipulation in that last Asuka match.
Why are all the babyface GMs stupid?
Because, you want to know why? It's a simple answer. Because the company loves to get heat. And so the GMs have to do stupid things so the heels can get heat. Has this hurt your interest in this product, Lance?
Sorry?
Has this hurt your interest in the product?
It has, to be honest. And also to the volume of the product I didn't even watch Extreme Rules. It was, an hour before the show that I realized it was even on. I wasn't home yet because it's summer and it's nice out. And it's like, there's not that many things I'm interested in.
Are you telling me that after listening to the Brian and Vinny show that night, you didn't go back and watch Extreme Rules?
No, I did not. I saw the Kevin Owens bump. That was enough for me. And the sad thing is, it's because there's so much product, I feel I can miss it. But generally when I watch, there's something I really like. I certainly don't like the whole 3 hours, but again, a couple of those Dolph Ziggler, Seth Rollins matches were great. And obviously that Mustache Mountain Undisputed Era tag match was great. But there's many times, like the Miz funeral thing this week on Smack, I turned the show off. I've gotten that when I'm really busy. If I turn the show on and I find that there's something that makes me embarrassed from the way my wife looks at me when I'm watching it, that I just turn it off and we'll watch something else. And when Miz came out with the mock funeral and the fake cane head to do the eulogy funeral for Team Hell No, I'm like, the guy hurt his ankle. This is stupid. And those are the segments that my wife, who's, often in the kitchen cooking dinner, we eat late and we're also mountain time. I'll be on the couch watching it and she just looks at me and I can just see the look of disdain on her face. Like, why do you make me watch this shit? And I get embarrassed and I turn the show off. But when, again, you get that really good Dolph Ziggler, Seth Rollins match, sometimes my wife's actually watching. Hey, it's caught her interest for a minute, and she doesn't think I'm an idiot. And it's so much better. And when there is a really good segment, wrestling is great. And when there's, 9 hours per week of stuff I have to watch, if I get busy and I come up one of those segments, it's like I just turn it off.
I felt bad today because Conan's on Observer Live, and he goes, have you been watching Impact? And I watch Impact like once every 4 weeks. And it is one of the downfalls of this job. There's a lot of great positives to this job, but Impact is like a really fun show. But if you ever listen to Observer Live or the Observer Mailbag or anything where I'm getting feedback, calls, text, emails from people, like nobody ever asks about Impact. And this, by the way, there used to be a period where everybody just complained about Impact all the time and said it was the worst show ever. So it's like this should be an improvement, but nobody talking about it, that's also sort of a negative. Point of this is, I got to talk about what everybody is asking me about and everybody is interested in. So I have to watch all of these hours of Raw and SmackDown and NXT, and I love NXT. NXT is awesome, but I mean, we've basically dropped Lucha Underground off the Thursday deal because, quite frankly, Vinny wasn't having fun and nobody was talking about it. So and Filthy wanted to review it, so it goes to that show. But the point of this is, every time I watch Impact in the last, I don't know, since the switchover, it's a good show. But there's so much stuff, and unfortunately, it's still under the radar to the point where I can't watch something that as a wrestling fan, I actually enjoy. Like, I could try to fit it in, but unfortunately, in G1, everybody's talking about the G1, I'm behind on the G1. It's tough, and that's one of the things about this WWE. That's why I get so angry about some of these things. And some people, they get honest and they're like, why are you so negative? Raw wasn't that bad, or SmackDown's been really good lately. And it's kind of like, okay, by WWE standards, SmackDown's been pretty good. But you know what? It's hardly the best wrestling show in the world. It's hardly the best wrestling in the world. It's like better than Raw, which is a low bar. So, anyway, the point of all of this is, yeah, I get really mad at some of this Raw and SmackDown stuff because I'm forced to watch this stuff, and there's so much better stuff out there, and there's so much talent in WWE that they could have better shows. But yes, the booking of these shows, the people they choose to push, the people they choose to put the championships on, the people who are really good, they're not doing anything with. It is very frustrating.
Yeah, one other thing, too, on the, because we similar to the Becky Lynch thing, just a booking idea. I was talking to students this morning. The Roman Reigns Bobby Lashley feud, because we were talking about promos and the scripting of them and why they have to be scripted. But again, I hate when two guys stand in the ring that are mad, because to me, if I'm mad enough at you and you get in my face, I'm hitting you. And I just pitched an off the cuff part of my off the top of my head idea. It's like, how great would it have been if the first time Bobby and Roman were in the ring, and the first time Roman called him Bob, because he does it with such disdain in his voice, hey, Bob. Bobby had just decked him, dropped him, and security pulled Bobby back, and they did kept them separated from that. And they had a close-up of Bobby's face that he said, you call me Bob one more time, I'll break your jaw, or whatever it is. I'll end you. And it's like, then have them in separate places. So when he's doing his promo backstage, Roman can look at the camera and call him Bob. Because to me, that is so disrespectful. And it's like, that's an emotional feud I can get into. And I equated it, I know you wouldn't have seen this because you don't have time to watch real television, but I've just finished Luke Cage, season 2 on Netflix. And Luke Cage had a love interest. I'm blanking Claire. I'm blanking on her name for a minute, but Claire was his girlfriend that he really cared about. And the villain woman basically threatened her. And Luke Cage, who's bulletproof, indestructible, could just kill anybody if he wanted to, got up in her face and said, you even mention her name again, I will kill you. And it was just so heavy. And you knew, okay, this is a line you don't cross. And later in the show, she started with like the first syllable, and he just looked at her and she stopped. And it's like, I think they could have got that kind of heat out of Bob. And it's like, I think that would have been so much better than Bobby standing there in the ring where Roman repeatedly calls him Bob, because he's doing it out of disrespect. And it's like, I think that's where a lot of time the script writers hurt the segment. Because I've spent a lot of time in a male-dominated locker room, a testosterone-fueled locker room, and there's a lot of, you better show respect, and there's a lot of, commanding the top dog, the alpha male mentality. And it's like, when you're in a combative environment, it's like you don't disrespect somebody. It's like when News walked into a locker room, everybody sat up a little bit straighter, because I don't want to disrespect Bad News. And it's like, if there was that, man, if he calls him Bob, and you could have done the bit where someone else accidentally calls him Bob, and Bobby just destroys him. It's like, I think that could have been a really good element of the angle.
I like this dynamic these two guys have. I know some people don't like Lashley, but I don't know. I mean, you could do that, I guess. I mean, I like what they've been doing, so I don't have a lot of complaints. I like when Roman calls him Bob. I think it's funny. I don't know. They'd have to be really, really good. I mean, here's the thing. They did the thing with Bobby's fake sisters, and Bobby laughed that off. So, like, Bobby would have to be really, really, really good to convince me that he doesn't like being called Bob. Like, maybe he could do it, but the fact that he's laughing off Roman coming out with 3 men dressed in drag pretending to be his sister, I mean, now he's going to be mad that he was called Bob. I don't know. If it worked, it works. It'd be great. I'm just not sure they could pull that off and convince me of that.
I think Bobby could do it. He when he really
the other big issue is if Bobby actually could say to Roman Reigns, if you call me Bob again, I'm going to kill you. Like,
well, you can't say that.
But you can't say that.
You've got to have.
You'd have to say I'd ruin you or I'll stretch you, which is not going to work.
Or even, especially if you hit him and dropped him and you stand him over, it's like, call me Bob one more time. I dare you. You know what I mean? Where you just know that he's not putting up with it. And it's obviously nowhere near at that level, but it's like my oldest daughter's name is Rebecca. And she's fine with Becca. She absolutely hates Becky. And it's like, if you accidentally call her Becky the first time, she'll ask you to not call her that again. She prefers Becca or Rebecca. And it's like, if you did it again, she's going to get annoyed. Now, obviously, my daughter Rebecca is not going to be as intimidating as Bobby Lashley, but
I don't know about
to
that.
Continually do it when you know they don't like it is just so. It's that pushing that buttons. It's like, I'm trolling you. I know you hate when I do this. I just think it would be great, and I think Bobby could pull off that stare of just call me Bob one more time. I dare you. And it's like, and then
I do like the idea that a grown man the size of Lashley prefers Bobby to Bob.
Hey, to each their own, man. But it's that's the point. It's about disrespect. And that's such a great buttons. It's like, no, I'm not calling you what you want to be called. I'm calling you what I want to call you. And it's like, to me, that's a great heat issue. And I'll be curious to see what they do. I'm disappointed that they're just rematching on television now. It's like the last pay-per-view was supposed to be a number 1 contenders match. They changed that, and they just had a match. Bobby won. And conveniently enough, they both won their 3-ways, and now we're just getting that same match with the stip. So it'll be interesting to see. I hope Bobby wins again.
You think it's going to be a 1-on-1, or you think it's going to be a 3-way?
I kind of think it's going to be a 3-way. I think they'll do a non-finish.
God. It's just like all this time, and we're just doing a 3-way.
Yeah, I hate 3-ways.
I mean, we had that 3-way the first time. I don't know, what do we have the first time? No, it was there was a cash in the first time. I don't even remember all this stuff. Yeah. But
thing that I'm surprised they didn't do, because this is what I would have done. Like when they did the angle that Brock doesn't see a challenger, he doesn't want to come back and fight anybody, there's nobody worthy of him. Like, why didn't they do the Braun Strowman promo the day after Money in the Bank? Where he just walks to the ring, holds the briefcase, and says, it really doesn't matter what Brock Lesnar wants. This contract says I get a shot at the world champion whenever the hell I want. I want it August, I don't know the date, 18th at SummerSlam. And or per this contract, Brock has to show up whether he wants to or not. And just, that's it. That's your title match. And let Braun Strowman beat Brock.
Well, that's my idea. That was my idea originally. And, I mean, I presume the reason they don't want to do that is because that's not what they're going to do. They want Roman to get a win over Brock before Brock leaves. Otherwise, there's no reason to do that. But you know what else somebody brought up to me that, I mean, their announcers are so fucking dumb. But, I mean, Vince could have told the announcers to bring this up, so I can't even blame the announcers. But when's the last time we saw Brock on TV?
No idea.
Okay. Well, it's been a long time, and it certainly has not been since Money in the Bank. And Braun Strowman has said, when I see Brock Lesnar, I'm cashing this thing in. Right? Has he not said that? Okay.
Yep.
So why aren't the announcers pointing out that ever since Braun won the briefcase, Brock has not shown up on television? Is he avoiding Braun Strowman? Is he afraid that if he shows up, Braun Strowman's going to beat him up and cash in? I mean, there's actually a story here that they could tell. No one's ever mentioned a word of it.
Yeah. And actually, it's funny. You talked about it on Observer Live today, that they've managed to get Brock go away heat. And it's funny, when he was away before, you kind of forgot he was gone. And then he'd show up and you go, oh man, Brock's back, great. This was the first time they talked about him not being here and he doesn't want to come back, that we resent that he's not here. Where every other time we just sort of accepted he's not around all the time, and then he'd show up and he'd surprise us, and it was fun. But now you're saying, yeah, he doesn't want to come back and surprise you, and they've really hurt Brock. But if they just did your idea, which is great, it's like, Brock's not here. Is it because he's afraid Braun Strowman will cash in? It's like, that's a great story.
It is a great story. Someone should come out. Kurt Angle should come out and use that as a way to get Brock on television the next week. Heyman's out there doing his blah, 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 blah. Kurt can bring it up. You know what I've noticed, he could say, ever since Braun Strowman won that Money in the Bank briefcase and threatened to cash in, we haven't seen Brock Lesnar here. Isn't that interesting? Heyman gets all red. He gets all furious. Next thing you know, Brock's there next week.
Or something else that I just mentioned, I just thought of that I think I should mention. You could also, and it's similar, I actually thought of this with the Summer of Punk, when he was going to take the belt and leave. It's like, what if they had the story, is Brock Lesnar afraid to come here? Because if he shows up, Braun can cash in. What if you had Kurt or whoever threaten, if Brock doesn't show up, I'm going to reinstate a rule we haven't had here in a while. The 24/7 rule. And if Brock doesn't want to come here, I'll reinstate the 24/7 rule, and Braun Strowman can come to you. I know how you like your privacy, Brock. How would you like him showing up at your compound in Saskatchewan? How would you like him showing up when you're playing with your kids? Because if you don't show up to Monday Night Raw and defend this title, I'm invoking the 24/7 rule on the Money in the Bank briefcase, and you're going to have Braun Strowman hunt you 24/7.
Dude, I want to see him on the farm, brawling. They could be awesome. You know what? Here's another thing, too. Your idea, let's think about when Braun Strowman was the most over he's ever been. It's when he's doing this stupid stuff backstage with ambulances and knocking stuff over. Like, you want to take the title off Brock Lesnar? If you can get over this stupid Roman Reigns thing, do exactly what you said, send Braun Strowman to the damn farm, have him brawl all over the place, tipping over cows, they're in the hay bale area, the whole 9 yards, and finally,
tipping cows.
Yeah, Braun he sets the entire barn on fire, Sable's running all over screaming, and he beats Brock Lesnar, he wins the title on the farm. I mean, you got a brand new Steve Austin right there.
That would be awesome.
It's my idea. Hey, listen,
Book it.
We got to talk about this old stuff before we go here, particularly this retro Raw Nitro and the Nitro angle where Jimmy Hart ran underneath a bus. Can you imagine what you're watching, by the way? And I like that Nitro.
Yeah, they've actually been better lately. There's been a few good, strong matches that have been good. But it just, when I watched it, and for those who haven't listened to the Brian, Vinny, and Craig show, if you haven't, you're missing out. Best show on the site. Best show anywhere.
In the world.
In the world. Better than anything you'll watch, listen to, or whatever. But yeah, when they had the furniture blanket on the ground under the bus so Jimmy could crawl under, it reminded me of a story that's really funny. When I was in WCW, if you remember New Blood Rising, I showed up in that really cool stretch limousine where, depending on which angle you looked at the limo, it was a different color. And 2 weeks later, Mike Awesome joined Team Canada, and he had the Partridge Family bus when he was the 70s guy. And we were given this is the segment you're going to film. We're going to film it outside. It's a backstage segment. And it was Mike presenting us with the new bus. And they had painted it red and white, and it was the Team Canada bus. And I remember looking at this thing going, this is terrible. And Tylene was with us, and we're like, all right, we're going to go out and film this thing. And I'm reading it, and it says, you're going to Mike Awesome present you with the bus. And in big, bold, highlighted font, it says, really put the bus over huge. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's like we're giving it, a 1970s school bus. So just as we're walking out and they're setting the cameras up, I turn to Tylene. I says, when we start rolling, I'm going to slide underneath this bus, drop down and count. If they want me to put this bus over huge, I'm putting this bus over. And she just looked at me like, you're not. I'm like, watch me. And she's like, no. And it was like, they want me to put over the bus. I'm going to slide under and put over the bus.
I love the idea that the Lance Storm character is supposed to put over the bus. Like, you should have just looked at the bus with the same blank expression while everybody else is going crazy.
Yeah, although before Mike joined, I got to go with a limo, and now I've got a old school bus. They actually wanted us to surf in on the roof of the bus the next week.
Of course they did.
They wanted us to stand on the top of the bus while they drove it into the building. And I think it was Ellis, the stunt guy, is like, that's not safe. They're not going to stand up there. So they made us drive the bus into the building and get out of the school bus. Like, we'd actually driven from, Atlanta to Des Moines, Iowa in a school bus. It was just like, oh, WCW was so bad.
You don't say. It was the worst.
Yeah, I can't wait. We're only a couple months away from Vince Russo jumping from Raw to Nitro. It'll be an interesting comparison.
Oh, God, it's like October. Like, I remember, the first week was good, and then after a couple of weeks, it was like, what the hell's going on here?
Although it is amazing, just for, for my 2 cents on the Retro Raw shows, it's been like the last 3 weeks that Rock went from being great to being an, oh my God, gigantic superstar.
Really? I felt that a long time ago.
No, it was, I'm trying to remember what show it was. Craig mentioned it, but he came out the one time and it's like, he's no longer number 2, he's 1B. It was just like, oh my God, I don't know if it was a Memphis show or what, but it was just like, no, this is a whole nother level. And it was just like, wow, Rock's, the next big thing, quite literally. But yeah, with the exception of, Rock, Austin, and of course, Vince being the greatest character of all time, there's a lot of bad stuff on these shows.
It's horrible. All right, let's do some plugs here. What have you got coming up here, Lance? I know that you've got, what is it, WrestleCade?
Yes, I've actually agreed to do another appearance. I'm not wrestling. I'm just signing autographs, posing for pictures. It's from 10 a.m. till 3 p.m. on Saturday. It's the Saturday. I don't remember the exact date now. If I had to guess, it's the 24th of November. I think WrestleCade is 23, 24, and 25. I'm there this Saturday, whichever that date is of the WrestleCade. So there's not many opportunities to see me, meet me, do autographs, and so forth. So WrestleCade in Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Holy smokes, Winston-Salem.
I'm pretty sure it's actually American Thanksgiving that weekend, I think. But I'm pretty excited. And one of the main reasons why this particular one interested me, Paul Ellering's going to be there. And as I've told many times, the Road Warriors were who first grabbed my attention as a wrestling fan. And I was the world's biggest Road Warrior mark as a fan. I got to meet and know Road Warrior Hawk in Europe and then again in Smoky Mountain. And I did a Comic-Con in Wales a few years back and got to spend the day with Animal. So I got to meet and get to know them. I've never met Paul. I trained his daughter. So WrestleCade will be my chance to meet Paul Ellering and hit the trifecta hat trick of meeting all of the 3 men involved in the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors. So,
man, oh man. Well, that's coming up, WrestleCade, everybody. So make sure you check that out. StormWrestling.com. Aside from getting bit in the head, how's that going?
It's going well. This will be the 11th week. So we've got one more full week. We wrap up on the 27th. So we're on the home stretch. I believe this weekend, the vast majority of the class has got booked on a local show doing a battle royal. I think they're doing a Storm Wrestling Academy class battle royal on a show on Saturday, I think in town for RCW. So they will get their first taste of being on a show, which will be a lot of fun for them. And then they're on their way after that. Again, classes in January, May, and September each year, booking into 2019. So if you're interested, again, stormwrestling.com. You can find it out there. You can follow Storm Wrestling Academy on Instagram for photos and videos from training. And obviously you can follow me at Lance Storm on Twitter. And that's probably about all I got going on.
All right, everybody. On that note, we're going to wrap it up here for today. Everybody should know all the info. StormWrestling.com, place to go for all the information on the school. And his personal page is up there, not been updated for a while. But if you're just learning about the Great Land Storm, that's a great place to go to find that out. Perfect place to go to train for wrestling. A lot of the folks that you see, shouldn't say a lot, but a fair number, a dozen or so, on the main roster, and many in NXT as well, all trained at Storm Wrestling Academy. So check that out. Cleanest wrestling school you'll ever see, guaranteed. I can tell you that.
Hey, there's also, you mentioned before, Impact Wrestling on Pop TV and the Fight Network. Taya Valkyrie, a SWA graduate, is a part of Impact Wrestling as well as Lucha Underground. And Gursinder Singh of the Desi Hit Squad in Impact Wrestling is a Storm Wrestling Academy graduate as well. So not just main roster and NXT, but also Lucha Underground and Impact Wrestling.
That's right.
And Tennille Dashwood's in Ring of Honor, so they're all over the place.
That's right. So check that out, everybody, and we are out of time. We got a lot of stuff coming up today. Brian and Vinny show with Granny. There's a new Observer Live up there, so check that out. And that is it. We will talk to you again after a while.